in finance, and having a real strong generational wealth, you know, and just basic cultural cohesion, if you will. That those three things: graduate from high school, get a job, and wait until you are in a sufficient partnership to have two people in the home to have children. It's an interesting kind of a model. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is if you look at those three groups, in general, they have a very strong family hold, meaning it's not only their immediate like family, a familial network of support usually. I
Yep.
mean, look at the people that I know, you know, in those communities, and they're still very, I don't want to say, I don't know how, but still work very much how I think we did in this country in the past, where, parents lived near children, lived near siblings, and were there as a network or a community, what, we might call a village, but that village at that time was your family. And so I look at those communities, and I think part of it is that they don't do a lot of this alone. Like, I think that kids are raised by multi-generational or sibling, like, there's like a community that raises your kids. And so I think that when I look at success, I think that, they have that extended support, which maybe in other cultures or in other places they do not have.
I look at that like a two-edged sword, if you will, or the front of the hand, back of the hand. Not only do you have support, but there's no place to hide.
Right. Well,
Don't even try to get away with it. But I
that's
think it's very, very astute. And there's one more aspect to what they're talking about that I think is also very important. I mentioned it earlier in the conversation, but good choices. Those three things set you up to have fewer bad choices you must make, you know, where you're more in charge of what's coming at you and the pace that it's coming at you, where there's not all of this survival thing that kicks in, and you don't get the ability to make good choices about the next thing you're going to do in terms of growing yourself in your life. So I guess that makes a four legged table as opposed to a three-legged stool. So Ken, you've been around kids for an awfully long time. And I know you well enough to know that you go beyond the people that are standing in front of you. You get to know them. You get to maybe experience their family. Who knows if maybe you actually trained entire families in the same group, or I'm sure of that.
Yeah, multi-generational. Yeah. I mean, actually, the people running the martial arts school right now are second generation, and one of them started with me when they were 5, and and I guess it's kind of interesting. I've seen successful, I guess whether you want to call it a family unit or I mean, and our whole thing was just being an ally for for everyone that walked through our door and helping them grow to be responsible contributing adults even if they're 40 when they start. And it was like our running joke. So, and saw that happen regardless of the cohesiveness of the family unit. um Saw some that came from broken homes that went on to do amazing things, some that came from incredibly stable homes that ended up in really rough situations. Some of them are no longer with us even, some of them handed everything, and it all was for naught, so it's just such an interesting thing. I think that, I question, and from my own personal experience, I think it's more to what Lisa said. It's what's the village around you, or maybe Jan said it, but that support, that you have, and also the fact that that support is a broken cup. Like our dojo was a lot of people referred to it as their family, as their community, as their support network. And it was that for a time until they were ready to move on and build a community of their own or join another community that better aligned. But it was fluid. And I wonder sometimes if part of the challenge we all face is we get stuck, so we're holding on to a system that no longer serves us because we've evolved or changed. But we're holding on to it out of some sense of obligation or, not recognizing the impermanence of things. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's just kind of interesting because I'm looking at almost 40 years of, you know, just contributing to the growth and development of my fellow humans. And there's no one thing that stands out, other than the values that we kind of just tried to distill and put into the design of every business we've ever done, which is, kind of create an environment that allowed for meaningful human connection and an empowered ability to learn, and learn that you can make bad choices and you can navigate through that and have bravery to take a risk and make a bad choice and navigate through it and then find joy in the present moment. And those are the only connections I've really found.
Well, what's immediately coming to mind, you're absolutely correct that the village makes all the difference in terms of the trajectory of a child's um, potential. And I'll take you back to my experience, in the inner cities in the 1990s. We had rampant gangs in every city. If you remember, we had like an influx of Crips and Bloods who were expanding their reach all across the United States and into Canada. I mean, we have more south of the border gangs these days that are making a big splash in the news. But I can remember going to Roxbury, and there were 91 shootings in the first 6 months of the year. They thought that was a lot compared to some of the other cities that we've got right now. But the point is that um, there were a lot of single parent mothers talking about how they can't keep tabs on their kids, and at the ripe old age of 8 or 9 years old, the gangs are already indoctrinating them and teaching them how to be safe and teaching them how to belong to something, and getting them to be in a dogmatic way more attached to them than to anything else, in the entire city of Boston. No church, no school. I mean, all these kids were dropped out of school usually by the time they were 12, 13 years old. And you may remember that the gang slogan was, die by 21 or you're done. And that was really the way that they looked at the world. Like they had the life expectancy of a fruit fly, and they didn't know what day it was coming, but almost every single teenager knew that they were going to get shot by somebody by the time they were 21 years old. And I had no way to relate to those kinds of comments. But if you stop and think about it, when somebody says, those four things that we talked about: graduate from high school, uh, get a job and wait until you have a partner, to have children, a life partner, and then make good choices. What do you have to do to the community and the background and the culture to make that possible? I mean, is this something we could take into inner city Chicago right this minute with, like, 34 to 50 gunshot victims per weekend? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that, do you know how many people have actually gone outside of the inner city and made really successful lives for themselves? More than you would think. There are a lot of kids who figure out a way to make something different happen in their life. So beyond the academic conversation of what, you know, what's the meaning of life and what are the secrets to my success, doesn't it kind of say, get yourself as high up the independence ladder as you possibly can, as you said, Ken, to find a community that will allow you to grow like a weed as opposed to one where you have to be afraid to go outside during the day?
Actually, I will, that what you were quoting from Michael Singer, the way he actually said it is every system is perfectly designed to deliver the result it's
It is
currently
perfect.
delivering. So it's not like that someone intentionally even designed it.
Right.
I think, a lot of these things, like those cities, one person didn't have some master plan. It was people making various decisions, some very self-serving, some altruistic that had unintended consequences, and here we are. So which makes it very hard, it's very challenging to untangle those things. And, whenever I would go and work with kids in those environments, um, it was always fascinating because the first concern they have is just survival. So it's really, really hard to think about going beyond that, when you're just doing what, most of human existence was just don't die until you've procreated. So that's a very, that's a challenging place to have a more evolved conversation from. And I remember one of the most powerful things, used to do this leadership thing. I was working with this group, and it was playing this game about smiling. And and the idea was, if you smile at someone, they can't help themselves. They'll smile back, you know? So I did it with this group, and these kids were in exactly the kind of environment that you were saying, and it did not work.
At
They
all.
had trained themselves. There was no freaking way. But I got them because what was funny was they could school themselves to be completely flat, expressionless, till they thought the exercise was over. And then the first thing they do would be smile. And then I'd get them, and they and they would laugh, and and it was really kind of cool. There was a lot of connection and interesting conversation that came out of it. But then all of that, the second they went back into their environment that was designed for them to be in a place of needing to survive,
Yeah.
they went right back to who they were. Nothing I said was going to impact that because it wasn't removing them, like you're saying, from the environment. So all you could hope is that you were planting some seeds that would make me help them start to look for that community in the moments where they weren't focused on survival. You know, it was challenging. I had lots of sleepless nights, you know.
Yeah. So you're now reminding me, and this is a really good segue into what do we do, if we do anything, or who do we be? Okay. So you know the story of how to train fleas?
Yep.
Okay. So there's three parts to this story. First, there's the part where the fleas are in the jar and it has no cover and they just jump out at will. Part number two is you train them to not jump any higher than the top by putting the lid on, and they hit it over a series of times and they stop trying. Once you take the lid back off, they never try to jump out again. And then what happens, Ken?
After they've all been trained that they can't jump out,
Can't jump out.
yeah, get one flea to jump out. Yeah, you put a flea in there that knows how to jump out, or all it takes is one, you know, and then they all
First,
start coming
makes
out.
it possible for all the rest.
Yeah.
And I really think that's a powerful message, that you don't go into a neighborhood and try to get all the fleas to jump out at the same time. You need some people to break away demonstrably from the pack and be able to show how they did it and recreate that process for the other people that want that off ramp, where you give them a different choice from joining the gangs by the time they're 12 years old.
Mm. I think
You know,
another
it's oh, sorry, Jane, go.
oh, no, I think another key is that, even though it's kind of hard to show in that story of the with the fleas, is that, it's another of the same kind doing it. So it's not someone coming from the outside, let's say, trying to help these kids to show them how to get out of where they are. Because I don't think, that person who comes in isn't had never grew up there, didn't live there, didn't, experience the same things they experienced. And I think about that with my dog, because my dog was afraid of water. It doesn't like water. And it's interesting because he's a black lab, but he doesn't like it. And literally, we were at the park and my nephew was with him and he wanted him to go in and he kept on trying to get him in. And I kept on saying, no, 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 no. If you want to get him in, he has to like